It's a joy to have us gathered here today, including those of us online, and to have this be a very special celebration of one of our most beloveds here at All Souls, Ms. Paula Cole-Jones. And I had arranged with our executive director, Tracy Hughes, for Tracy to introduce Paula, but unfortunately she hurt her back, so the honor and privilege gets to fall to me. Paula Cole-Jones is a management consultant and diversity specialist with over 20 years experience in designing, facilitating workshops and dialogues for leaders and organizations. She is an innovator in institutional change. In 1999, Paula founded ADORE, a dialogue on race and ethnicity. She conducted hundreds of group discussions and workshops across the country for faith organizations, community groups, and government agencies. She is a lifelong member of All Souls Church Unitarian in Washington, D.C. Paula is the author of a UU World magazine cover story, Reconciliation as a Spiritual Discipline, and she's the editor of a Skinner House book, Encounters, Poems about Race, Ethnicity, and Identity. Paula served on the UUA Article 2 Commission, which provided us with our new denominational identified values that include love at our center. In 2025, she received the award for Distinguished Service to the Cause of Unitarian Universalism, and let us welcome her today. We have a very special, highly confidential, screened preview showing of a clip of a documentary about the Eighth Principle that features Paula that is coming out from Drum, and so we get to see a little clip of it now.
My name is Gregory Ford. I will be speaking the words of Bill Rice. I first met Paula Cole-Jones as her calculus professor at the University of the District of Columbia. But before that, my wife, Shebby, and Paula's brother, David, were high school classmates at Coolidge High School in our native Washington, D.C. A few years later, Shebby worked at Children's Hospital, National Medical Center with Roderick, another of Paula's brothers. In the early 1980s, already close neighbors in Northeast Washington, our families came together at All Souls Church. Paula and her mother, Betty Cole, were lifelong Unitarians and were both indispensable guides on our new faith journey. Paula is an engaged listener and communicator. Over the years, she and I have had long discussions about church polity, about adult spiritual development, including anti-racism curricula, about youth religious education, and I have to mention, about the trials and pleasures of raising teenage daughters. As a trained scientist, a plant biologist, Paula has the analytical skills, some of which may even have come from her long ago calculus course, skills that enable her to negotiate the complexities of the tasks she undertakes. These skills led to her creation of a dialogue on race and ethnicity course, better known as ADORE. Her leadership in the development of the Eighth Principle, the essence of which is enshrined in the shared values of Article 2 of the Unitarian Universalist bylaws, and her construct of a committee of committees. All of Paula's work is informed and enhanced by her skillful integration of intellect and compassion. Paula, All Souls is proud of you.
Good afternoon. I'm Pam Kukis. I want to start by saying, as President of the Board of Trustees, I want to extend the gratitude of the board to Paula for her many, many gifts to All Souls. The scope of tributes that can and probably will be given here today are vast and multifaceted, and I thought that I would just offer 3 little vignettes of experiences I've had with Paula that exemplify her role as a guide, as a teammate, and as a change maker. Paula has been my guide and many other people's guides on our own journeys toward wholeness. In the early days of the Read Project for Voting Rights, we asked her to come and do a session just for us before we went on a trip to North Carolina to knock on doors. She was very gracious in giving us a half day of her time, and even more in helping us understand that our own expectations, attitudes, preconceived notions, and stereotypes could be getting in the way of the work we were doing and how we could act accountably to dismantle them. I also got to work with Paula on the committee, combined board and search committee that hired Reverend Anastasia. And so I got to see Paula as a collaborator and teammate, someone who offered her wisdom and her experience without ever making anyone feel like we weren't all a team and all contributing. And her work's super tight, you know? The stuff that she said she was gonna do got done, and got done well, and it was just such a delightful personal experience for me. I also got to experience being a delegate at the General Assembly where we voted on the new UUA values. And just having her in our ear, literally, as we voted and debated and considered amendments, talking about all the thought and care that went into these decisions was an incredible experience and really made me appreciate what it took to make that change happen. So thank you, Paula, and we're so grateful, and I'm so grateful for these experiences.
Good afternoon. I'm speaking twice, first for Tom Loke, who is home with a sick toddler. I'm going to read his remarks. I first met Paula in 2017 through the 8th Principal Task Force. What struck me immediately was her compassion, her vision, and her steadiness towards that vision. Our task force became its own kind of covenant, meeting weekly, in person and virtually, even before the pandemic. Holidays, vacations, and Tom says even Christmas Eve here, which that's a lot. As we organized anti-racism jubilees and navigated difficult conversations, Paula kept us centered. She taught me the necessity of being explicit and recognizing and dismantling racism. As a physician, I tend to intellectualize and compartmentalize, but Paula pushed me to recognize racism viscerally, front and center. That clarity shaped not just our language, but our integrity. These past years have been hard. Sometimes it feels impossible to know what action keeps us together. Paula helped us see our work as part of something larger, a community of communities, not a closed family, but an accountable network of voices strengthening the whole. Because of her, I now ask, how do we strengthen each part? How do we rise against the constant historical backlash that meets the progress of anti-racism? Thank you, Paula, for showing up every week and teaching us how to show up too. So I'm going to speak for myself now. I'm Neil Manzullo, and I know Paula primarily through 2 periods of volunteer service from about 2018 through 2023. As the Young Souls representative on the Transformation Team, which was a group that led reform and reconciliation efforts at the church, and then while I served on the Board of Trustees, including as president. When I think about how Paula impacted my service to the church, I think about the function of church elders in governance. Elders, those people who have dedicated their time and energy to the church, connect us to our history and our values. And they often connect us to our unwritten history and our unwritten values. It is really easy in church governance to become very legalistic and to focus on texts, on bylaws and policies and motions. But that focus on the written word can leave out the sometimes unwritten promises that we make to each other. At critical moments for All Souls, Paula has reminded us of the sometimes unwritten commitments that we have made regarding multiculturalism. One example comes to mind. Over 2 decades ago, the church committed to having a multiracial leadership team. That was a commitment consistent with our long-standing values and practices, but it was also not a commitment easily reduced to a specific bylaw or policy. The commitment was still real, however, and Paula, through her guidance for church leaders, through her storytelling of our history, and through her reconciliation efforts over the years, helped me and other church leaders not lose sight of that promise. I am grateful for Paula's leadership in reminding us to take the time and the humility to understand the unwritten promises that we make to each other. I am also grateful to her as a mentor and a role model. Thank you, Paula.
Hi, everyone. I'm Peter Montgomery, and I'm so grateful for Paula's persistent devotion to All Souls over the years. And working with Paula is memorable because Paula is a presence. She exudes this quiet confidence that demonstrates that she is grounded in purpose and conviction. Almost 30 years ago, I served on the board during a very hard time of damaging conflict. And Paula helped lead us through reconciliation and to start building infrastructure that could sustain a multicultural community. 20 years later, when the departure of Reverend Susan Newman Moore left us in turmoil, Paula stepped up again to help lead the transformation team. I was part of its Trust and Reconciliation Working Group. Paula, Derek Robinson, and I talked about our work and the work yet to be done, work we're still doing, in a Sunday service in spring of 2019. So I went back to that service to find some of the wisdom that Paula shared. Here's a little bit of it. We cannot build a beloved community without building an anti-racist, anti-oppressive community. For those who have asked, why must we keep talking about race? It is because racial bias and inequity are spiritual issues. It takes spiritual energy and commitment to be intentional about justice and inclusion. So Paula reminded us that this is spiritual work and also that it holds spiritual rewards. She said, there's the church that we know, and then there is the vertical, that which is bigger than us all. When the church breaks your heart, as it will from time to time, what is it that brings you back? This is the vertical, and it is from this space that all kinds of things happen, like faith, love, mercy, forgiveness, atonement, reconciliation, co-creation, and more. Amen, Paula, and thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Perry Roper, and I'd like to share a quote from Maya Angelou. What I really want to do is be a representative of my race, of the human race. I have a chance to show how kind we can be, how intelligent and generous we can be. I have a chance to teach and to love and to laugh. I know that when I finish doing what I'm sent here to do, I will be called home, and I will go home without any fear, trepidations, wondering what's going to happen. Paula, you've taken these words seriously. You've taken those chances. Those of us who have had the opportunity to know you are better people as a result. I could speak for days about all you've accomplished. But the one thing about you that stands out the most is that, to me, you manifest what beloved community is all about. Thank you for all you've given this church, this denomination, and yes, this man standing here. I thank you for your presence in my life and for being present in that unique way that only Paula Cole Jones can. What a phenomenal gift you are to the world.
Hi, I'm Whitney Cooper, and I had the honor of working with Paula after I attended a Jubilee anti-racism training in, I guess, launching the 8th Principal Task Force. And people call you a change maker, but I would call you a puppet master, because once you agree to do something with Paula at the church, her hooks are in you and you're not getting out until her plan is delivered. So I tried to step away a couple times, and she reined me back in, which I'm so grateful for. And your influence on my life personally is incredible. Like, once I took that Jubilee anti-racism training and started working on the 8th Principal Task Force and then the transformation team, the veil was lifted of the, naivete I had as a white woman walking through this world, and realizing that, like, everything I do from this point on is to dismantle white supremacy in our institutions, in the church, in my friendships, in my relationships, and raising a daughter now. And I just want to say how incredibly grateful I am that your hooks are so strong and they keep me in check. And I just want to say one more thing about when we were going through the crisis and Reverend Newman had left and all these people were speaking about how this was affecting them. You sat in the corner with me and you were pointing and you were saying, look at all these people. All these people have gone through Jubilee anti-racism training. Do you see the impact it has on our lives? And I was like, dang, yes. Like, you are wise. Yes, I know, I want to follow you, even though I can get real frustrated on how I have to continue to do this work. I am eternally grateful for you and everything you've done for me and this giant institution. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Brenda Barron. I've been asked to read a message from Julia Washburn. But before I do that, Paula, I just want to personally thank you. You have influenced me in so many ways, and to know that all the committees that I'm on now, your voice and everything you've taught me is continuing throughout the ministry that we're doing. So you're always here. All right, this is from Julia. I wish I could be there to celebrate Paula Cole Jones with you in person. I can't think of anyone right now who is more deserving of recognition and beloved community work. Paula and I have known each other for over 30 years. We worked together in the 1990s, supporting environmental education for DC teachers and children. Paula facilitated strategic planning for the DC Environmental Education Consortium, an organization going strong today. I remember how instrumental she was, working with our team, encouraging our best thinking to create a vibrant, effective organization. Paula continues to use her remarkable people and organizational skills to pursue beloved community and work to stamp out racism. She powerfully, skillfully, and courageously works to break down racism not only on personal and community levels, but also systemically. I have been honored to witness and support her work in several capacities. Here at All Souls, with Dialogue on Race and Jubilee training, she has helped me and others address our own personal racism and learn how to do anti-racism work. On the community level, she has helped us work toward beloved community through very dark times, repeatedly. It continues to be challenging work breaking down the systemic racism at All Souls, and we continue to lurch in that direction with her patient guidance. Paula's transformational work with the UUA, conceiving of and advocating for the 8th principle, was brilliant, difficult, and successful. It is a great feat to steer a big ship into a beautiful harbor, but Paula is a great pilot. We know this work is never done, but having Paula's help and encouragement is huge. The National Park Service, this goes on, it's a little page. The National Park Service is a really big ship that Paula has helped change course. National parks protect the places and stories that make up the American narrative. They are a tangible representation of what our nation holds dear. Parks and historic sites should represent all Americans' stories and tell a complete history of our nation. They should be welcoming for all people and should have an inclusive and respectful organizational culture. As Associate Director of the MPS for Interpretation, Education, and Volunteerism, I work to create change on the public stage and the internal culture. I hired Paula to help us. Together with staff from across the country, we created an internal program called Allies for Inclusion. Allies was a safe space for open dialogue among staff on racism and other forms of oppression, which allowed people to better understand themselves and each other and connect on a personal level. She trained hundreds of people to lead dialogues where they also worked together on MPS systemic change. The work helped expand the narratives interpreted at the parks, supported research on untold stories of historically marginalized people whose histories are American history. The dialogic technique we used was also developed into a method for discussing difficult topics with the public. One evening, we gave a party for the founders of Allies for Inclusion. Paula and I sat together on the couch, watching people with all kinds of differences laugh and party together. We looked at each other and said, "This is beloved community." A moment with Paula that I will never forget. While our current presidential administration is trying to ban or erase all this good MPS work, the truth is they can't. The ship turned, and while it might shift back a little, the reality is the work began then and will continue to move forward. Paula's skills, charismatic approach, and passionate dedication to peace and beloved community were instrumental for the National Park Service and will continue wherever she sees the need. Yeah. In conclusion, I need to say to Paula Cole-Jones, thank you. You are a bright light in an often dark world. You are living proof that people can change if we give them the support and the direction they need. You have shown us the way, and I, for one, am deeply grateful. With deep love and joy, Julia Washburn.
My name is Nadine Bowden, and I had the good fortune to meet Paula during a Jubilee anti-racism training over 10 years ago. And I'm honored to have the opportunity to give her her flowers today. Keep your powder dry. It's a phrase that Paula often uses to remind us to be strategic, not reactive. For this arduous journey to bend the arc of the moral universe towards justice is a marathon, not a sprint. And what will empower the community of communities to bend the arc towards justice is not merely allyship, but comradeship. A deep and lasting commitment to the work that at times can be uncomfortable and frustrating. These are among the most salient lessons that I've learned under the tutelage of Paula Cole-Jones. And I've learned these lessons largely because of something I still do not understand, and that is Paula's ability to lovingly and supportively guide you to where you are needed in the battle under the guise of asking you if you would like to do the thing that is needed. For myself and Ellie, that was serving as facilitators for Adore. I had never been a facilitator before. I had never had conversations about race and ethnicity, but I'm so thankful for the powerful invitation that Paula extended to me for that to be a part of my life. I'm sure I'm not alone in the bewilderment, as Whitney has shared, just as I'm sure I'm not alone in expressing my deep gratitude for all that Paula has done for our communities and for me as an individual. Thank you, comrade.
My name is Derek Robinson. When I read the intentional and specific language of the 8th principle, I turned to Nadine and naively said, "Did white people write this?" She laughed and said yes. In that moment, my attitude towards All Souls and Unitarian Universalism shifted. I was new to All Souls and soon learned this was the handiwork of Paula Cole-Jones. Working with Paula on the transformation team expanded my mind in many ways I just didn't expect. Paula transformed not just my opinion, but my understanding of what it truly means to dismantle racism in ourselves and our institutions. Paula gave me language to begin naming the enormous gap between those who simply know about racism and those who experience how it operates consciously and unconsciously in our lives. When Paula introduced the 7 levels of readiness, which tracked racial and multicultural change, I wondered, how could such a seemingly simple framework, how could that possibly dismantle something that's so entrenched? But when we applied it together in small groups, it brought remarkable clarity. It created a space for honest reflection without shame and accountability without defensiveness. Paula gave me more than ideas. Paula gave me tools, patterns of thought that allow me to engage in conversations about race with people of different backgrounds calmly, constructively, and with hope. Because of Paula, I see a path forward that I often felt was unreachable. Paula, I will never be the same again. Thank you.
My name is Barbara Quirpru, and this is a special moment for me because I've learned some things over the years about presence, gratitude, and timing. Today, I get to thank Paula for her extraordinary years of leadership and for all that she's done for All Souls and for our denomination. Paula has always been purposeful in a way few people are. She is passionate, dedicated, and committed. She's also tactical and creative. And she was relentless and unyielding when it came to the 8th principle. She taught me that you have to step up and meet what is hard. Meet who is hurting and what needs fixing. And that you have to start the conversations that can change and remake how things work, and then move on with the journey. For me, this is Paula's legacy and wisdom, and she deserves our highest praise, our greatest admiration, and our most sincere gratitude. Thank you, Paula.
And I'm sorry, you can't hear me? Okay. I became a part of the anti-racism training through Whitney, who took the hooks of Paula and told me I was going to volunteer for something I didn't even know what I was volunteering for. And so I did the volunteering, and then I realized what I was volunteering for, and it has been all of my life anti-racism training. I'm definitely a 60s baby. And I don't know, being the last person to speak, everything you thought you were going to say has already been said. So, so what I'm going to say is, on one of our meetings, it was, I think about the second or third meeting I went to, and it was the first meeting, and it was for a couple of hours on Friday. We did our presentation, and the next day, this lady came back, and her eyes were wide open, and she said, "You know, I went to the grocery store after the meeting, and I saw how the people of color was treated." And I was like, wow, that meeting was only a presentation, but this is something that would get us where we need to be. So Paula, I thank you for giving us a sacred place where we could learn and grow. Thank you very much.
In a moment, Paula and I will engage in a question and answer that the audience will also have an opportunity to partake in. But before that, we have one last tribute by video from Denise Anderson.
Oh, good, you had one too.
Can I start by saying thank you? Oh my goodness. You know, when I look and I see all these people who I really love, I mean, how can you be in beloved community without loving the people that you are working with and surrounded by? So thank you all for what you've shared. And none of anything I've done would have been possible if people weren't interested enough to get hooked, right? That's the invitation, and then committed enough to stay the course. And we've done some incredible things. Thank you.
So my first question, Paula, is a little bit how you got hooked on All Souls. And you shared this a little in the video, which was so beautiful. Please pass forward our gratitude to all those who are working on that film project. You and your siblings were raised here at All Souls, and we've heard how much you have positively shaped our community. Can you draw the connection between your experiences, what hooked you here at All Souls, and how they informed your calling to transform Unitarian Universalism and, through that, the entire world?
Okay, good, thank you. Let me start by having us welcome my sister, who also was here in the Sunday school, Carlin. Carlin Cole, thanks for being here. So my mother chose All Souls. Any of you who have talked to me probably heard at least that part. She chose All Souls for her children for Sunday school. I was very shy, extremely shy. And so I grew up in this church, a very shy person. I never had any idea that I would do any of the kind of leadership that I've done. And I can remember sitting right here on these pews when David Eaton's ministry, when his memorial service happened. First of all, David Eaton's ministry and the congregation really shaped my identity as a Unitarian Universalist. And for anyone who doesn't know, David Eaton was the first African-American minister here. So there was no contradiction between race and racial inclusion and justice and Unitarian Universalism. I didn't have to cross that gap. But when his memorial happened, and he was such an incredible person, he had an incredible impact on the city and also on this church. But I can remember saying to my mother, if there ever was a person whose shoes I would want to walk in, it's David Eaton. And, it was just, he was one of those spiritual exemplars. And she said, be careful what you ask for. Well, that was 1992, I think, was his service. And it was 1996 when I answered the call from the board to come in and to help with reconciliation. I wanted to give something back. The church had given me so much, and I had, I was just a shy person on the periphery, even all those years. I came to church with my mother, but it was really my mother who was anchored here in the church, and she didn't drive. So when she asked me, are you going to church? I'd say yes, whether I was planning to or not, and I would bring her to church. And she would bring me to ethical dialogue, and I was meeting people through her. So if you can imagine being one of these little children and then growing up, and you really have to find your place because it's very different. So anyway, that was the hook. But I also loved Unitarian Universalism because I learned to see the world. We learned comparative religion in Sunday school, basically, world religions. And when I started traveling internationally, I realized I didn't have to unlearn things. I didn't bring certain biases to these different countries and their way of being. And I went back and I thanked my mother for choosing Unitarian Universalism. So that's what hooked me. What hooked me on the anti-racism work was the church was hurting. And it was hurting around things that were racially sensitive. However people describe the problem is not that important. We were hurting and it was racially sensitive. And I had skills and I said, it's time for me to give back. And I just didn't know 30-something years later. I'd still be at it, but I wouldn't have it any other way, except one thing. I'd have built money into it differently. But when they talk about a calling, that's how you know it's a calling. Because it's like you can be angry, you can curse at it, and you're going to do it anyway. Whatever, It was clearly a calling.
I think one of the things that I value and know about you is I always want to pause to just let what you're sharing land in me fully before moving on too quickly. So thank you. So, Paula, as you know, but there's no reason why our friends here with us would know, is that you came to the last two congregations I was served to help introduce the framework that you developed through the rigor of thought, observation, your theory. And in each of those congregations, and also when I was chair of UU Ministry for Earth, you really helped catalyze significant forward motion in those communities in terms of their commitment to inclusive diversity, equity, anti-racism, anti-oppression. And there were some key concepts that really helped guide those communities forward. Concepts including the community of communities, engaging in multicultural practices instead of practices of the dominant culture, conflict resolution as a leadership practice, and the importance of being a multi-generational community. Can you take us through those concepts, or I know you at a high level, or I know you continue to iterate? What are some key framework that you want All Souls to be holding in our mind as we're doing this work?
So I've been asking congregations around the country to make 4 shifts. One is the shift from 7 principles to 8. You know, so many people well-intentioned, and we know we're good people, but if we're not explicit, then we leave it to chance. The 8th principle had us all across the country sign on to be intentional and deliberate, and that was a powerful shift. So that was one shift. Another shift is the shift from the unexamined dominant culture, it's a paradigm shift, to seeing ourselves in a multicultural paradigm or a multicultural framework. And if you make that shift cognitively, you just start in a different place, okay? So again, we don't leave it to chance. Another shift is shifting from where dominant culture has this kind of hierarchy that really rewards individualism. We shift to a community of communities where I don't get to be the exception to the rule, that the relationship changes with my community and not just me as an individual. And so, you know, I was thinking about the decorations and the Black History Month. The impact is because we have a Black community here in the church that has a voice and is engaged. And so Black History Month gets celebrated in a way that really works for us, right? But the community of communities piece is very, very important. And it's, believe it or not, it's like a new conversation. You know, you would like to think that it's there already, but what's key is that our ministry then becomes about the support and nurturing and equity between the communities. And as long as we function as a group of programs and committees and individuals, we don't ever have to reach that point. So what does it mean to build equity into our relationship, community to community, whether it's those communities are based on age or race or gender or our interest, arts, music, worship, it doesn't matter. When the communities come together, how are we in relationship with other communities? So for example, I give this example to other congregations. If you're going to plan an auction, and most churches hold an auction, instead of asking, you know, who would like to serve on the auction committee, you ask which groups would like to collaborate to plan the auction, so that the communities are stepping up to plan the auction rather than a group of individuals. If our communities are relating to each other and collaborating, the culture will have to change. And these are practices for a beloved community. So anyone who comes to church can find what I call a landing place, which that's there anyway. But then it's not just landing there, it's how we are invested in each other and in the overall institution. And then the last shift I ask people to make is from conflict avoidance to understanding reconciliation and restorative practices as competencies. If those are competencies for us to develop, we don't have to avoid conflict. And if we are avoiding conflict because we're uncomfortable or we're afraid we might say the wrong thing or that somebody's feelings might get hurt, then we stay stuck. We cannot change unless we are willing to break something, right? Like a whole lot of things are getting broken right now. And we're going to have to break those to put the better thing back together. So we need the skills. And not just the skills, but the expectation that when something cracks or breaks, we still hold the bonds between each other and we can build together. So those are the 4 shifts I've asked us to make. And it's another heavy lift, so if I call you, answer.
I see ways that All Souls is leaning into this. One of them is on Reverend Rob's sabbatical team. All these different justice ministries come together and go, what about if we did this together? What would it look like? Who are you meeting with? How are we actually trying to care for the same people and families in our neighborhood, but we're approaching them in different ways. And so it's really interesting to see us trying to meet this moment in a more collaborative way, owned by the different communities within our communities, for example. Paula, sometimes I hear people express feeling circumscribed by their racial identity, and I'm using that language in contrast to their ethnic identity or community identity. What would you offer to those of us who are feeling that way, who are feeling like we're stuck in a role that's been assigned to us?
So, if you're doing the work ongoingly, you continue to grow and have insights and your philosophy or your approach changes. And very recently, in doing a lot of thinking about identity, because, I'm at the age where my identity is changing as it relates to age. I just moved out of DC into Maryland as a lifelong Washingtonian. That's an identity shift, right? And so I've been thinking a lot about identity. And identity work is important because we live in a world that stereotypes us, not to our advantage, often to our detriment. Well, sometimes it might be your advantage. But if it's your advantage, it's someone else's detriment, okay? That stereotyping creates an automatic binary where there are winners and losers. Beloved community has to dismantle that, right? So, but in thinking about this, so I encourage everyone to do racial identity work, to do the gender identity work. Age is important. But what I've come to realize as I've pondered my own identity changes is maybe more important now than identity is really roles. We play many roles in life. Some roles we take on, we step into. Sometimes we are invited into a role that's already preconceived. But how you step into that role matters. And if you think you step into that role and you're free of racial identity, age, or gender, you're wrong. You bring that with you. But the role is important. Like what we've talked about here, I stepped into that role over and over and over again, often maybe invitation, but more because I saw the void, I saw the need, I stepped into the role, and because our work was transformation, I knew there weren't a lot of people who could tell me how to do it, right? And so the role was critical. I might have played it out differently if I was a different age, a different gender, different racial identity. I played it out given what I've been dealt, right? And I think we did a great job. But so for people who feel like they're being constrained by a racial identity role, I don't mean to be flip on this, but get over it. Do your racial work, because we can't dismantle racism if we pretend that it's not there. And pay attention to your roles. I want people to step into roles as anti-racist, whatever your racial identity is. Take that president of the board role as an anti-racist. Take the OWL training role as an anti-racist. Whatever the role is, if you're not doing it as an anti-racist, you are probably reinforcing the very old structures and norms that we have been trying to change. And we look at what's happening in the country, we have not done the work. We haven't done enough. Now, I do believe, and this is important, and this has kept me going for many years, I believe that we can create anti-racist communities in pockets. I'm not naive enough to think that it's going to be a blanket anything, and right now, for sure, we know that's not the case. But I believe that we can do it in pockets, and I believe that All Souls is one of the places where we can, and we have been on this journey. I believe Unitarian Universalism can and must create anti-racist community, and when we say anti-racist, also anti-oppressive communities. And because I believe in that, when I show up, I expect it to happen.
I have one last question, and then I hope we could hear Denise through the video, and then I'm going to give an opportunity for both people who are joining us online, almost about 20, as well as people in the audience to ask some questions before we finish at 2. So that's our plan. Which is, many people here, each week we read these connection cards, and I see in that how appreciated, how much people appreciate hearing stories of resilience or hope. And you have maintained your commitment to this work for decades. So the question is, when doing this transformation work was at its most discouraging, what did you do to be able to continue or to return to it? And or what gives you the ability to hope now?
So, I had to think about that, and there were at least 4 or 5 times when the wall was just too big and solid, and I had to ask myself, is it possible? Do I stay the course, or do I throw in the towel and walk away? And some of you know when some of those points were. And Whitney told part of it. At one of those times when I was really ready to walk away, I have to laugh because I sat like on one of those end pews, which is not where I usually sit, and I wore a bright yellow jacket that day, and all I wanted to do was hide. Really. I wanted to go to the back row, but we had arranged the 8th principle that we would all sit together. And I stayed there. And even before I came in the church that day, I picked up the phone and called a minister friend in Massachusetts and had a conversation because I just didn't know if I could go on. And while we were in this sanctuary, and this was around the Rob Susan period, I watched the people get up at the mic and claim the church and call us into accountability. And most of the people, I would say 90% of the people who were speaking up had been through Jubilee training. And my despair went to bliss because I was like, hey, we've got something to work with now, right? And so all that work we've been doing all those years, laying the groundwork, really, really does matter. And we started rebuilding. And I even had someone on the 8th Principal team say, don't take it on, don't take it on. But I knew exactly what to do because we had done it that first go-around, Peter, when, and Barbara, when the church was reeling after the Aldrich period. And that was really when the community of communities piece really started coming into sharp focus for me. But I knew what to do the next time. And we stepped in and we started doing the work of healing, and we succeeded. So that was one of the periods. There have been others. I would say two things that have helped me. One is, this is lifelong work. And I committed that I would only do it in healthy environments. So I was not going to sacrifice myself to the work. And so we work at building the healthy environment first. You know, we put love into it, and then we can live in a loving space even if things are difficult. So that was one. We do the work in a way that's healthy, and we bring as many people along as we can. Another piece, aspect that I learned is to take a bird's eye view. You hear me say that a lot, because any moment can feel devastating, or it can feel euphoric, like you've done it. No, we are not there. So celebrate the euphoria, learn from the despair, and so the bird's eye view connects us to the years of people who were doing this work in this church before us, right? Like I said, to walk in David Eden's shoes really meant just to continue the work. And then the third aspect of this is that those are times when I myself must go through transformation. Because if I am not capable of being transformed, there's no place for me to go but out the door. Because I'm not going to fight a whole institution. I'm just not. And so my own transformation has to occur. And each time it looks different. Sometimes it might look like, oh, you're overinvested. Step back some and see who else is pulling. Other times it might look like, so when we were doing Article 2, which was national, there was a very strong group, opposition group, very strong. But they were loud, right? And I can remember being at General Assembly, and we have been, a lot of times I'm avoiding them. You do the work for the people who will, which I learned from my husband. I don't spend my time fighting against the people who are opposing. You don't get to use our platform to oppose what we're doing. It's strategic. But I can remember looking at some stuff that was happening in the chats, and I just started going down. I could feel my energy going down. And then when it came time for the vote, everything that they were proposing, they were so far outvoted. The positions that they had put up for the board, everything they were trying to do. The vote was like 90-something percent different from what they were proposing. And I've learned this over and over again. You have to trust your work, and you have to trust the community, right? And once those votes took place, I had my marching orders. I was very clear. So you don't need a whole lot of things to tell you that you're on the right path and other people are on the path too. But sometimes you need some measurement so that you know that your work is not in vain.
Thank you so much.
Let me say one more thing, is that you make lifelong friends while you're doing this. People who you care about, you pick up the phone, you call lifelong friends. And that's beloved community in action.
Let's have this tribute by Denise, and then we'll go to questions from the audience.
Good morning. I'm Denise Anderson, and I'm a member of the Souls for 32 years. In 1998, Paula Cole Jones co-facilitated a leadership session.
That was a magical act.
Good morning. I'm Denise Anderson, and a member of All Souls for 32 years. In 1998, Paula Cole Jones co-facilitated a leadership session on rebuilding our church after the tumultuous departure of many congregants, church leaders, and the senior minister. She managed our diverse group dynamics, fostered participation and interaction, and prevented dysfunction when one of us lost focus of the big picture. Yes, Paula is skilled in herding cats. Paula has high emotional intelligence. When I became anxious during our search committee meetings, Paula calmed me by clarifying with compassion. She created space for me to loosen up and trust the process more. Thank you, Paula, for showing me grace. And thank you for your many years of diligent guidance while herding cats at All Souls and throughout the greater UUA. We love you.
I invite people here who are in the sanctuary to raise their hand, and I will bring them a microphone so we can receive your question in the room and Paula can answer it. And then I will also be tracking the chat online for people who want to have their question be brought into the sanctuary.
Thank you so much. What advice would you give for people who are new to this sort of work, who are just starting to learn about how to do anti-racist, anti-oppressive community building?
So good question. You need to be in a community, and if you have a community that is also committed to the work, and in particular if you have a diverse community, then you will learn a lot just in the everyday interactions that you're having with other people. Have people who you can share some of your deepest feelings and concerns with. As you heard Denise, you know, we could talk about things, lots of people I've talked about things with. So one of the main things is we can't do it alone. Don't go it alone. There are so many resources available, so you can learn a lot through, you know, what's online, on social media, books, movies, it's everywhere. We're just swimming in it. But try to find a course that has a good analysis of power and history, Because if we don't understand why and how this system was put in place, we can do good work our whole life and never really affect the change of dismantling these systems. So I would say that if you want some recommendations on trainings or things like that, well, there's a lot happening here at All Souls, but if you're in a good course that talks about analysis, then you will also meet other people that you can stay in conversation with. And we've heard about Jubilee. Jubilee has been that for many people here. Okay. One more thing, journal. Journal. I discover a lot of things in my own time journaling. Hi.
Hi, Paula. It's
Hi,
great to see you. I'm Jennifer Bailey. It's so nice to be with so many people who I've come to church with for so many years. I have a question about how our anti-racism work, and racism was born around the same time as anti-nature and the earth, like an attack on Mother Earth. And the work that I'm doing now is a lot around sustainability. And I see that these issues are connected, anti-women, they were born around, this anti-planet of Mother Earth. So I'm wondering, how do we build greater capacity in connecting this work with protecting all the species on the planet, our air, our water, the systems that are beyond the human systems?
Yeah. Thank you, Jennifer. If people who were utilizing our natural systems, I say that because corporations are utilizing our natural systems with no commitment or accountability to anti-racism, anti-oppression. In fact, it becomes a part of their strategy to do their most damaging work in communities where people of color and people of low income live, people who don't have the political access to stop it from happening before they do it, right? So it's key. I wrote a chapter in a book called Justice on Earth that you can get from Skinner House, and there are a lot of contributors there. But I looked at the history of the environmental movement, and if you're not studying racism as a part of the environmental movement, then you really are missing the point. And I don't mean you, but anyone. There were two movements. The reason we had to have the environmental justice movement is because the environmental movement did not address the inequities around race. The reason we had to have the womanist movement is because the feminist movement did not address the issues around race, certainly not adequately. So anything that we do, if we are not doing it from an anti-racist grounding, we are in some way or another replicating the system of inequity. I just believe that. No one has proved me wrong yet. So I say that there's a natural connection, and if we look at what's happened, not just to indigenous people, these issues around immigration. Let me say a point on immigration. My husband is aging, and we've spent a lot of time in hospitals and rehab and caregivers at home. Most of them are immigrants. We keep messing around, there's not going to be anyone to take care of aging people in this country. Most of them, trust me, are immigrants. And so if we are not addressing this interrelatedness around racism and oppression, we all will continue. We're going to suffer at some point or another. Maybe the system has to break in order for us to rebuild it. I think it's a little hard to see right now, but we have to imagine the world that we want to live in, and we have to out-imagine the one they're trying to put in place. Our imagination must be stronger, more persistent. We have to pour our hearts into it so that it is standing when theirs can no longer breathe. And if we don't, then we leave the space for them to imagine. And we do not want to live into the world that they are trying to build. Yeah. And that includes the environment. And let me say, with the community of communities, we haven't put it in place yet, but we fall far short of what it means. You know, when I drive down the street, especially if it's a place I drive often, I see the community of communities and the plant life, right? You know where that stand of trees or where those daffodils and forsythia are going to bloom in just a couple of weeks. We see it there. And I was at a film festival, and it really just hurt. It hit me in the Pacific Northwest, where all of the shipping is, happening. The whale population is being decimated from the propellers on the boats. We have, whoever the people are who are managing those systems have no regard, no respect for the community of whales. It ought to be criminal to destroy these animals. And so I think we need the community of communities in many ways. It's a mindset, it's an ethic, it's a way of life. And we fall far short, and we let commercialism dictate too many of the outcomes in our country.
First, Paula, thank you so much for all of your work, especially going back to Adore. And the last question was very similar to mine. I am increasingly a champion of social permaculture, very much community of communities, especially the social permaculture, incorporating not just the people ethic, but the planetary ethic and the fair share ethic, those three being the major ethics of social permaculture. And I know the Adore started with race and ethnicity, and I heard you talking a lot about all these different identities and other cultures. Can you talk a little bit about the challenges with all the intersectionality of beloved communities and the complexities of dealing with common things like race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, maybe handicap or ability, but as you were talking about all these other things that make up our identity, our age, our professions, geography, other things, that are not thought of as these social categories like race and ethnicities, but are really important, especially in a spiritual community, and one that really appreciates diversity and is trying to create a multicultural, right, beyond just race and ethnicity. What are the challenges, and how do you think we can really do that in a practical, real meaningful way in a place like this?
Yeah. I think one of the big challenges is not feeling like we have to get our way, right? And in a culture that leans towards individualism, you can always feel like you can try to get your way. In the community of communities, it teaches us to respect different ways of doing things. People come together for different purposes. We have different boundaries, different identities, different aesthetics, and it teaches us to respect that. I think that the community of communities gives us agility because, it's like even your opposition group, they're a community, but they do not get to impose that on everybody else. That's their community. I don't impose my way, well, some.
You invite us.
Anti-racism needs to be our way. But, the point is that your community is that place where you get that enrichment, that closeness, where you don't have to interpret what you're saying because other people share some aspect of reality or experience. But it's what happens when we come together, how we respect each other. And that you talk about the complexity. In some ways it's simple, but it's not easy because people emotionally get triggered. And we have ways of doing things. There was a period where excellence was like the big thing. I remember in my government job, excellence, excellence. Well, that could be the very thing that creates the barrier to inclusion, because excellence supposes that there is a right way, a better way to do it. And it doesn't leave room for inclusion. It doesn't leave room for innovation. And a lot of what we need to create, it hasn't been done yet. So it can be messy. You have to break some of those things in order to create the something new. I think for us to really practice being in right relationship with the people in our communities, and then create that right relationship and accountability community to community. And communities, they're fluid. You move in and out of different communities. But what it does is it moves us from me and I and my way is the right way, which often causes conflict in churches that is irreversible, right? And if we learn to respect other communities and then find the solutions that work overall without taking away from the communities and what they're doing. This is, I think, our next frontier in culture and in Unitarian Universalism. And if we're doing that, then we include the natural world too, right? There are just some things that should not be tampered with. And because of commercialism, it's like people feel like they own anything and everything. Somebody may be trying to patent your DNA. So there are ways that we need to be strong and respect the rights of other people so that we can have our rights as well. But you're right, it can be complex, but it's a practice, it's a discipline. Like reconciliation is a spiritual discipline. Beloved community is a spiritual discipline. And you got to do it over and over and over again. And you can do it any place you go. You are creating, or you're bringing love into that interaction, into those relationships. Whether it's people to people, or whether it's ageism, whether it's our relationship with the natural world around us, we need to wake up and we need to do this work. And so as community of communities, one community often cannot do the kind of repair work that's needed. But a lot of communities together, look at what's happening in Minnesota. It's not one community. And pardon me, I cannot help but get into politics some, but remember when Kamala Harris was running, almost 2 years ago now? Remember all the communities that started coming together, forming almost overnight. Collectively, the communities can move things that a community cannot, or even a group of individuals cannot. So, if we do this work and really have community of communities as our central way of being, I think we can change a lot of things in the world. It may take longer to lay the foundation, but once it's laid, we can move things faster. You're welcome.
It's time for us to conclude, but I would like to ask permission to ask one more question before I do a closing remarks. Do I have collective permission? I've been checking and no one from online. I would have made sure that got prioritized. Thank you for calling to make sure that we're being inclusive. My question actually is a reflection that not all of us at All Souls are in this room. I don't see anyone who is a minor in this room. And yet we call ourselves into being a multi-generational community. And in the work that I've done with you in the past, you've asked us to consider, as we're doing our work, are we practicing our work in building communities, at least in enough spaces that are multi-generational, including young adults, not just children. I learned last month that in our congregations nationally, we have fewer than 20,000 children. There are fewer than 20,000 Unitarian Universalists under the age 18 or younger. Any thoughts around building beloved community multi-generationally or from generation to generation you want us to be thinking about?
So I think that young adults should be a primary focus for us. I'm going to pick on the 8th Principle team, which was a multi-generational community. And since then, at least 3 members of the community have had children, right, that they didn't have in the beginning. And I'm a grandmother now, and I wasn't then. So, but young adults are I think, a prime audience for Unitarian Universalism for many ways. But if you want multi-generational work, more of the work of the church needs to center and be geared towards young adults and families. My mother chose All Souls when she was looking for a place to send her children to Sunday school, as many people are. Now, one thing I imagine they took into consideration, families are smaller than they used to be. So I think we have to be careful with the numbers, what they are really saying. There were 6 children in my family, and I had 1 child. So that has a big impact on the numbers. But I think to families and their many formations, single-parent families, grandparents who are raising children, adopted children, natural-born children and families and young adults must be a part of the center of church if you want a multi-generational community. And if they're involved, they will plan things that work for them and other people who share their interests. So you will get more, I think, you'll get more young adults, you'll get, even younger people will come because the young adults are younger than we are, right? But so that's key, we have to shift. And in many congregations, that's a challenge because the age demographics. There's some churches that have no religious education programs at all. But those who can need to really start making that shift and listen to people who are members of the church who have children who may not be showing up because what they need and want for their and these are conversations I've had, what they need and want for their children, they may not feel is being provided. So those are people you don't want to lose, and you need to follow up with them.
Thank you so much, and thank you for talking about the importance of young adults. In conclusion, I want to share my little tribute and appreciation for you, because we met when I was 25, and I was the assistant treasurer of the board, and you were one of the board of trustees. Chuck, I also met during that time, as well as others in this room. And I'll just say, the reason why I am here today, both as a minister and wanted to return as the developmental minister, is because of all the nurturance, guidance, inspiration, and particularly mentorship that I got from you and from others. Since that time, I have called you when I was doing research papers on how to put churches together after combustions that involved the departure of ministers. You've come and guided me and guided communities. I was serving as a minister in doing eighth principle work. And we would bring in a lot of people, and the feedback I would get from leadership was no one's contributions and presence was more transformative, led to greater commitment than yours. And I'll say throughout the decades that I've been able to grow up and call upon you, what I have received from that and what I hear from others is you've modeled what you've told us, which is this is not about an individual doing a work. This is about inviting communities to learn how to do this work. And because you've been generous, and generous in building capacity in others, it is rippling out in ways that are so profound and beautiful and give me more hope. So thank you for nurturing communities. Thank you for nurturing ministers. Thank you for nurturing the young people who have gotten to move alongside of you, and I'm just tremendously grateful. And my last question really is to the audience, which is, we have asked Paula to have a Jubilee training here over the summer. Many of you have heard about how impactful it is. She also is interested in helping us learn more and move more fully into truly being a community of communities. Would you like this to happen? Would you say, Paula, come back, come back, come back? All right.
That invitation.
Can we conclude with an enthusiastic applause? And I believe we do have some literal bouquet of flowers as well as to thank Paula. Thank you, everyone, for being here today.